the bright lights on me. So, well, thanks everyone. I think we've got a few participants at this time. Thanks for joining us this morning. Chuck and I are both very excited to be kicking off the Friends of Strong Towns Club. We're excited to share some of the stuff, some of our strategy, the way we think about impact, and some of the metrics that we track. We've tried in our own way to structure these webinars, which we hope to do at least twice a year. We've tried to structure these as a kind of shareholders meeting. So just as Berkshire Hathaway takes the time to share their strategy and their performance with investors, we want to do the same with those who are investing their resources in us, and to let you know kind of what we're tracking and the impact that we're seeing. So I'll turn it over to Chuck at this point, who's going to go through a presentation on the Strong Town strategy.
Thanks, Bo. This whole organization started off as a blog back in 2008. I started to write 3 days a week, just to try to both myself understand better and to communicate, I think, more clearly, largely to what I thought was going to be an audience of professionals, why our cities were going broke and why we were struggling financially. That blew up, and I've been writing a series now about the history of strong towns. Many of you have probably read it or seen it. I think I'm on year 5 or year 6 now. This is our 10th full year of strong towns. So you know the early history. In 2015, which I haven't gotten to writing about yet, but I'll give you I'll start there with the narrative. In 2015, we put together our strategic plan. It was our first real strategic plan. We had some other ideas of what we were going to do, but this is the first time we sat down. And I think the most powerful thing about the strategic plan is that we said, here's the things that we are not going to do. We had like an overwhelming number of requests to do all kinds of different things, from lobbying to consulting, to starting a political action committee. What we did is we sat in this meeting, and after a day of kind of talking about our mission and what we were good at and the effects we were seeing from what we were doing, we put on Post-it notes everything that we did well, or everything, let me say, everything that we could possibly do as an organization that we'd ever thought of. And I'll give you the craziest idea. One of the craziest ideas was that we would find a city and then invite Strong Towns people to all move there, and we would essentially take over the city and then make it like the Strong Towns utopia. That was one of the ideas we put up on the wall, and every idea had its own Post-it note. No idea was too crazy. But of course on there was, write the blog, do the podcast, all this stuff. And when we went through this, we had all these ideas up on the wall, and we said, let's organize them based on how well we do this. Like, if we look at this and said, this is something we're really good at, this is something we're not very good at. And we organized them in a row. And it took a while, because we actually went through every single item and said, are we better at this than this? Are we better at this than this? And we had this ranking of like 30 different things. Once we had that done, so we were ranking them from here's what we do really well to here's what we're not good at. Then we asked a different question. We said, what do we do? What on this list would be most effective in achieving our mission? And so what we ended up doing then is ranking them up and down based on that criteria. And what we wound up with is this magic corner. You can think of like a 4-corner box, a magic corner of things that we were good at that we also saw made a huge difference. And there were other spheres there then of things that we were good at but didn't really matter, things that mattered that we weren't really good at, and then things that we didn't think were really going to matter that we didn't do well anyway. And all those things became things we started to say no to. We actually turned down a grant right away after that meeting to do some consulting work. We made some real radical changes to our staff. And we started down this different path of implementing this strategic plan. And we're now 3+ years into it. And I actually feel like we're at the point, and this is why we're starting to do this series of conversations. We're actually at the point where this plan is, starting to show some significant results. So there's a copy of the plan on the Friends of Strong Towns page. But I'm going to go through a little bit and delve deeply into each aspect of it. Basically, our strategic plan says we're going to do three things. There's three things we're good at that actually make a difference in the world. The first one is we're going to create powerful content. The second one is we're going to share a message widely. And the third being that we're going to nudge people to action. So let me go through each of these. This is the most text we're going to get today, but basically our approach, and this came out of the early writing of Strong Towns, but also just kind of the churn of back and forth, incremental investments, little bets. We emphasize resiliency over efficiency. We design systems to adapt to feedback. We're inspired by bottom up, not top down. And we seek to conduct life at a personal scale, and we become obsessive about accounting for our revenues, expenses, assets, and liabilities. We do the math. This is what the core of our message is, and we always keep bringing things back to these 6 kind of foundational insights and principles. So when we're talking about creating content, what we're talking about is a series of doing our own content and also building up an audience of just thought. So part of this is our own contributors, our own people who do stuff. Everybody knows this. We see it on our site, strongtowns.org. We try to publish 3 articles a day. That's 3 articles each weekday, so 15 articles a week, plus a compilation post on the weekend. So if you're tuned into us, you're getting 16 articles. It's funny because a lot of like the early people say, I can't keep up. And I tell them like, I can't keep up either. I do my best to read everyone. Daniel on our staff who manages our content does read everyone. I try to listen to every podcast. I don't keep up. Don't feel bad about not keeping up. Part of the strategy is to create lots of doors for people to enter. And so if an article doesn't work for you, the idea is that it will work for somebody, and we'll get them in the door, and then we'll get them our content. Part of what we're doing on a day-to-day basis is just following and tracking along. And I actually have opened up here a lot of the tools that we use. I'm going to show you Chartbeat in real time. This is right now at this very instant, there's 180 people on our site. You can see where that's relation to a week ago. Last Tuesday, we were at about the same. We were at 190. Here's all the pages that people are on. So you can see like our top content right now is this podcast that we put out yesterday. I'm really happy to see that. Podcasts tend to do well in podcast audience, but we have trouble converting them over to web audience. Here, this is our peak thing. We've been trying some new things with our podcast lately. But this gives you a sense of all the content we've got right now and who's on what page. We use this to manage the homepage. So when you look at things that are above the fold, what gets the big photo, what gets on the top, what we try to do here is have our hottest, newest, best kind of most trending content up at the top for people to grab. You see it's updates there in real time. As people log on and off the page, we get the kind of instantaneous update, and we have this on kind of monitoring it all day. We also use this program called Crazy Egg, and I got a couple of these up. Crazy Egg is basically a piece we use to analyze and understand how our content is doing, how people interact with it. Writing a good content piece is more than just having like compelling words. That will get some people, but there's actually a trick to the way you use fonts, the way you format a page, the way you lay things out, the way you use photographs, that help people navigate through the article more easily. Chartbeat, and I'll flip over to a couple live. We run these analysis on most of our posts, most of our top posts for sure. What it does is it gives us a sense of how people are interacting with the piece. We can then use that to, if people get stuck in a certain place, edit that part. So this is what you're looking at here is a scroll map. What this shows, white is a lot of people have gotten to this point. When you start to see the colors fade a little bit, you're seeing people drop out. We got a big photo in the middle of this one that usually is like a killer for people. They tend to drop out. We pick up a little bit here. People skipped over that and they're back into it. You see we get kind of white here again. And then it will fade out towards the bottom. This one actually ran pretty well. Once we did this, we went in and fixed that photo, so it's not the big full wide screen, and actually improved the scroll rate a little bit with it. We also get a thing called a heat map. Heat map shows you where people are clicking, so where people are kind of interacting with the page. We also have a little thing in here called the confetti, where we can actually see, where they come from. When we're running special kind of things, where we're bringing traffic from certain sites, we want to see how they interact with our site and how they follow the content through a stream. And so this is a really great program to allow us to do that. Again, a little bit of sophistication in how we do. We're not just putting content up. We're actually taking the time to maximize and understand how each of those pieces work. We've been doing user testing. We went through a period of time earlier in the year where we sat down with half a dozen different people and we just asked them to navigate the site. What does the site mean to you? What are we trying to convey? Can you find this? Can you find that? And just watched how they worked with the site. The idea is we don't want our layout and design to be a barrier to getting to our content. We actually want the layout and design to facilitate that conversation. And so we've taken a lot of time to understand how people interact with our site and how we can improve that. We're doing the podcast. I think most people on this call know that we have run the Strong Towns podcast now for something like 8 years. I think we're approaching 500 episodes. We're quite a ways along. We started in the last month. We've started 2 new podcast stream. We've started the Upzone, which is a discussion format podcast. And then we started a podcast called It's the Little Things. The idea of these 2 is to kind of not only add to our content stream, but provide a couple different formats. The Strong Towns podcast tends to be a monologue or interview format. We wanted one that would be more back and forth discussion. But we also wanted one, and this is the It's a Little Thing podcast, that we'd be able to highlight people who are out taking action and people who are out doing things. We wanted to be able to really put some emphasis now on how our work is affecting people, what they're doing with it, and allow that to inspire other people to go out and take action. We've been doing web broadcasts. We've been using this format, Zoom. Our goal has been to do one a month. We've been kind of on and off between doing Ask Me Anythings, which are, a way where we're trying our best to handle this huge volume of questions and inquiries that we get in a way that's respectful to the people who are asking them, but also, doesn't suck up our time. We could literally have 5 staff just answering questions and comments and inquiries all day, all the time. So we've tried to use this as a way to handle the best of those, or the ones that we think will have the most impact. We also have had some guest people on. And so it's a way for us to leverage some of our connections with experts in the field to be able to have our members and other people ask them serious questions. In addition to our native content, so stuff that we are producing ourselves, stuff that our staff does or volunteers or contributors do, we also focus on non-native content, where other content providers that are doing things in similar fields that we can share with people. Our goal is to become a place where people go for thought. So if I want to know what's going on with cities, if I want to know what's going on with building places, if I want to know what's going on with biking and walking and city finance, I'm going to be plugged into Strong Towns because they're going to give me like the stuff on the cutting edge. And so we spend a great deal of our time and effort sharing stuff, and not just sharing it, but putting our spin on it, using that to light conversations, to get feedback, to kind of nudge things along. Again, we're using metrics to understand what we're doing. And I'm gonna take a second to kind of walk through some of these because I think you'll be impressed. We use a program called Buffer and another program called Edgar to manage our social media feeds. I'll walk you through these. This is the Buffer interface. What you're seeing here is the queue. This one probably already ran. I should refresh the screen. If you go on our Facebook site now, you'll probably see this post. What we do is you can think of this as a queue. We fill this up with content. There's a couple pieces in here right now. There's a bunch of empty slots. Those will be filled up before the end of the day. You can see it goes on. Sometimes like on the weekends, we'll fill this up for a few days. What we do here is we share stories and put our spin on them. And then what Buffer does is it slowly drips them out on this schedule that we've created. All of our native content goes into here. So everything that we produce goes kind of to the top of the list. The non-native stuff sits in the queue. And then as the native stuff runs out, the non-native kind of fills in the gaps. We also use a program called Edgar. Oh, your feedback's important to us. I'm sure it is. Edgar is for what we call evergreen content. So when we produce something natively, we will run it through Buffer. And when we get something new, we'll run it through Buffer. But a lot of times, we have stuff that we could run again and again and again, stuff that doesn't get old, stuff that's not like tied to a specific date or time. We call that evergreen. And if it performs really well, what we do is we put it in this program called Edgar. Edgar will run over and over and over our kind of backlog library of content. We have almost 1,000 pieces of content in Edgar on a rotation. And so if you've seen, things from 2 years ago, 3 years ago pop up, and you're like, wow, I remember that piece or why, that's because it's in Edgar and it will just continue to run over and over and over again. We're on about a 4 or 5 month repeat loop. So it's not like a top 40 radio station where you get the same hit like 10 times a day. We've got enough content where it's a pretty wide loop. But this is a way for us to not lose that effort, to continue to recycle that content and keep it fresh. And I'm going to show you in a minute how we're reaching new audiences with this. So we're actually introducing our best stuff to new people coming in the door. Every week, we take the stuff out of Buffer and out of Edgar, and we analyze it. What we're trying to really get at is engagement rate and click-through rate. What of the stuff we're running really resonates with people? And I'll tell you, after having done this now for years, it's fascinating because I will write a piece that I think is really great. Or we'll put together an article that we're sharing that we think like we just nailed this. We nailed the headline, we nailed the photo, we nailed our take, our caption on it. This is perfect. And we'll run it and like nothing will happen. It will be horrible. It won't go anywhere at all. And we'll do something that like I'll throw together in 10 minutes and we just quick post it. And you're like, I wish I had given this more time and thought, and bam, it'll blow up on you. It'll just go crazy in a way that you never dreamed. We call this jab, jab, jab. The idea is that you just keep kind of jabbing, and every now and then something will break through. Something will kind of fall through. So what we do is we analyze every week how our stuff is doing. You see here this spreadsheet. This is a spreadsheet of all the posts we ran the week of July 16th. So you can see along the bottom here, we've got all these weeks we analyze this. On the left here, we've got this rating system. These are home runs. The top one is a native. This one came out of Edgar, so it's a recycled piece of content. The next one is a non-native in Buffer. You see, it's like, what are we going to do with this? We've got, excellent, above average, average, and then we've got some stuff that was low performing. We don't, that's our euphemism, I guess we could say. Totally bombed, but, we try to, there's a little bit of grade inflation, Humbo. What we do with these in a different way is that, once we get down to this low end, we do a little bit of analysis and say, okay, is this a good content piece or not? What are we missing? And can we fix this one to be better? We've already put the effort into posting it, putting it together, running it. We put it out there in the world. It didn't work. Did it not work because it was just a bad timing? Like it came out right when the Kavanaugh Ford hearings were going on in the Senate and nobody was watching our stuff. That happens. I'm going to show you in a minute where that happens. Or, did we just miss something? Like, is this not good? Can we rework it? Can we change it? This is where we go back to Crazy Egg. We go look at other things and we say, how can we make this a little bit better? Sometimes we give up on stuff and we say, this didn't work. Despite our best efforts, it's not going to work. Other stuff that does real well, we try to promote more and use these stats to, really refine our approach. So that's what we're doing with non-native content. Of course, part of preparing our content and getting our message out there are the events that we're doing. I will be on the road about 58, I think is what it's going to wind up being. Last year it was around 55. I think this year we're scheduled to be 58 nights on the road this year, doing events, doing meetups, doing walking tours, doing lectures, speaking engagements to audiences big and small all over North America. I think the most exciting thing for me right now is that we actually have other people internal in the organization who are starting to be in a capacity to be able to do these as well. We have a essentially unlimited supply of places that want us to come and share our message with them, which for a nonprofit trying to share their message is an amazing home run. When people will pay us $3,000, $5,000, $8,000 or more to come and share our message with them, it's like we're earning revenue for our organization, while at the same time we're meeting our organization's core mission, which is to share this message. It's amazing. I hope next year I'm anticipating not only being able to do the events that I've been doing, but able to have one or two more people here in the organization who can go out and do these at the level that people expect from us. So at a really high quality and high level. I just put this in as let me back on that. We have a whole kind of set of metrics that we use to kind of judge how well we're doing. Our audience growth, this is since we started our strategic plan, has been phenomenal. I mean, it's just been amazing. We have more people now in a month on our site than we did in a whole year, back not too long ago. So the traffic growth has been amazing. We share, this is our monthly metrics report. We report to our board every month on our metrics, how things have been going, where our audience is at, where our memberships are at, where our email list is at, where our whole kind of pipeline of getting our message out is at. We share that every month and have a discussion with our board. Part of this process of now doing these briefings is that we're going to share that with you as well. You have access through the Friends page to our ongoing metrics. You can see not only this year in real time, but you can see prior years and get a real sense of how we're doing, what's working, what's not. I welcome your questions and your introspection on this. I'm a firm believer in doing the math for cities. I'm a firm believer in doing the math for us. And part of what we do is say, if this is working, here's what we expect to happen. And we track those things. And so, you've got access here to the list, and we're going to be giving you over the coming months, years, our interpretation of this data and how we're looking at it and how we're using it to make decisions about the organization. But let me just summarize it by saying our metrics are really strong. Like we're in this amazing kind of growth wave, and we're feeling very confident about our strategic plan because the things that we said we're trying to accomplish, we actually see happening. So beyond creating the content, we've developed these processes for sharing it widely. I went through with you Buffer and Edgar and our whole kind of approach to social. Basically, our notion here is that we've created this audience pipeline where we start from, and you could even go back a step further here. people who have never heard of Strong Towns at all, or don't know us, don't know our message. How do we get them in our audience? How do we get them reading our stuff, interacting with our stuff, listening to our podcast, watching our videos? How do we get them in our audience? Once they're in our audience, how do we get them to be what we call a weak connection? So someone who's following us on social media, someone who is essentially receiving stuff from us, but not necessarily interacting with us. We then try to move along to a strong connection. This would be email or Slack. How do we have two-way conversations with people where we share things and they get back to us and we're having an ongoing dialogue? And then how do we make them advocates for our message and members of our organization? How do we get them to a point then where they're out there sharing our message with others, taking action in their community, and supporting the overall Strong Towns movement so that we can reach more people, so we can continue to grow? Let me walk through a few of the things that we do here. I showed you the way we use social to get our stuff out, Buffer and Edgar, the analysis we do, the whole pipeline. We've also used an advertising approach. I have to tell you, when we put together our strategic plan, this is the one part that I'm like, this is not me. I think of like online advertising. I'm of the age where online advertising was like Viagra ads and, things spam that you didn't want to get in your email. And there's a part of it that's like, I don't want to be that. Like, that's not what we're going to do. My gosh, that is not what we do. We become really, really sophisticated at an approach to meeting new people and then bringing them into our conversation. This chart kind of lays it out in kind of a technical way. I'm going to walk through and show you just an overview, some of the things that we do. The idea is we want to find people who should like our message and should be interested in it, go out and put our message in front of them. And then if they bite, a sense, you can think of it almost like fishing. I'm a old fisherman myself. If you can think of it like fishing, once we get a bite, then we want to reel them in. We want to give them more and more and more and more. I'm going to talk mostly about Facebook, although I'll get back to Google. And Bo, if I don't, remind me. I didn't put anything in my tabs here about Google, but I think it's important because we're starting to do a little bit more too. So here's the ad platform we use to run Facebook ads. We're spending about $1,500 a month right now on basically building this pipeline up through Facebook. Like I said, we've got a lot going on Google Ads. We actually, well, let me talk about Google Ads in a second because it's a different approach. This right here is an audience, active Facebook lookalike audience. Basically, what Facebook allows you to do is get your message in front of very fine-tuned, honed audiences. When you hear about Russian trolls influencing our election, I actually read last night about how Russian bots helped drive down the ratings for the Last Jedi, the latest Star Wars movie. When you hear these things, what you're talking about, what you're hearing is Facebook's ability to really hone in on a very tight audience. What they allow you to do, and in this case, the Facebook lookalike audience is our most successful audience. This is where we say, who are the people that are most engaged in our content right now on Facebook? So who are the people that are clicking on our posts, are commenting on our posts, are interacting with us, which really is like a jolly group of people. I love our Facebook community. We get substantive feedback. We get high levels of engagement. Who are those people? And Facebook can identify those. It's a list of 20,000, 25,000, 30,000 people at any one time. And then Facebook can do this magic thing where we say, take those people and create a list of 2 million people who are very similar to that. And that's what this is. It's a list of 2 million people who look like our most active Facebook members. And then what we do is we put our latest, hottest, best, highest performing content in front of them. I'll give you an idea of what this looks like. We have a rotation of content pieces that come in. So right now we're running 19 different ads These kind of run themselves. So we don't have to do a lot of work on this. It's kind of automated. Our best stuff automatically gets imported into here and then gets shown to people. If it doesn't perform through here, it gets automatically shut off. So you can see this top one on bird cages is shut off. But the second one on incrementalism is not. This is one of our highest performing posts. And so what it does is it just takes this bit of content that ran and it says, show this to these people in this list. If we look at this list, then what you'll see is that like yesterday, I'll show you the stat here when it comes up. Yesterday alone, we reached 354 new people. So people who have not been on our site before, not seen our content or interacted with us. We reached 354 new people and it cost us 4.5 cents per person. Over the last 30 days, just with this group, and we've got 3 different groups running, we reached over 4,000 people. So those are 4,000 brand new people who are now like in our, have seen our content and clicked on our stuff. Here's kind of the amazing thing then. We actually have this group called Top Posts. And what these are is this is a collection of all the people who have clicked on us in the last 30 days. So that 4,200 people plus thousands from those other groups that we're running. What happens is when they go to when they click on our content and go to our website, now they enter into a different campaign. We no longer show them that other one. They're already in. We no longer show them that stuff. What we show them now is a steady diet of our best all-time stuff. So the idea is you just met us. You just, wow, I just heard of this Strong Down stuff. I like this article. I clicked on, I followed it. Now for the next couple of weeks, actually, I think it's 4 weeks, you are going to get regularly our best of the best of the best stuff. The stuff that we've shown really engages people, really drives engagement, really gets people involved, really gets people interested and motivated in our message. And so, again, you can see the cost per click here is a little bit higher. Yesterday we were at 4.5 cents for the brand new audience. This one is at 7.7 cents. So still not like a ridiculous amount of money per click. But these are kind of like a self-selected group of those casual browsers. These are people who now are showing that they're more interested in the message. They're more interested in our content. They're more interested in what we're doing. This is part of that pipeline process. It's part of introducing our stuff to new people, growing our audience, growing our reach, and creating the movement part of what we're trying to do. In addition to the advertising, the Edgar buffer stuff, the social stuff, the weak connections, when we get to a strong connection, Slack or particularly email, we utilize that to, again, bring people along that pipeline further. We have a whole process of onboarding people into Strong Towns. So if you sign up for email, we've got a series of emails that we send you. We've tested these out to see like what messages work best. How do we get people involved? If they don't reply, is there a way to follow up? We get all the stats on this stuff. And so the idea is that, we're trying to get the highest open rate, the lowest bounce rate that we can. We build up these lists. We now have an email list of 45,000, roughly 45,000 people. And you can get that exact number in the monthly metrics report. And then we have people who are highly engaged. That list is about 8,000. So people who repeatedly come back and open our emails and are getting our content. It's the highest list we've ever had. We're at about double what we were a year ago in terms of those people. This is there are places where we get stats and get feedback and data. Facebook is one of these kind of insidious platforms because they give you really good data, really good feedback. I'm going to click over to actually our insights page on Facebook. If you have a Facebook page, like your business or whatever, you can go and click on the insights and get a whole bunch of information, including just the raw data on all the stuff that's gone on in your page. One of the things that I keep an eye on in addition to like how well our posts are doing, is how we're doing in the space. How are we doing compared to other organizations that are doing similar kind of work? Here you see City Lab, the American Conservative, Strong Towns, Next City, the American Planning Association, Streets Blog, Grist. I don't know how Facebook sorts these. Like, it doesn't make much sense to me because they're not sorted based on page likes. If you look here, this is the number of connections people have. So City Lab has 191,000 connections. It's connected a huge number of people. If you go down, Grist has got even more, 283,000. Over on the right, though, this is engagement levels, and this is a raw number. How many individuals engaged with content last week, or in the last 7 days? So for City Lab, they've had 6,500 people engage with their content for last week. It's a huge number. Strong Towns, we're at this last week, so this is the current data, we're at 3,700. 3,700 on like this much smaller base of people that we're connected to, that we're reaching. The amazing thing about this right now, I got to tell you, this is when I alluded to the Judge Kavanaugh hearings. We have seen like every kind of social metric that we have, not necessarily the email and the readership on the site, but the social metrics just take an absolute nosedive over the last week. It's just like everything's cratered. And this happened 2 years ago during the election season there. We were kind of anticipating that we might get this in the few weeks before this election. The air kind of gets sucked out of the room when there's a major news event, and our stuff tends to kind of drop off a little bit. So the rate that we're bringing in new people has dropped off. The cost for doing that has gone up a little bit. And you can see that our engagement is a little bit less than City Lab. For the last, really since June, I would say, first half of the year, we were about like this. Like, this is the ratios we were kind of looking at. We were consistently ahead of like Grist, would beat everybody else. I mean, everybody else is very, very, very low in comparison. We're ahead of Grist, but we were, maybe 40% behind City Lab. Now, since June, we have been tied or ahead of City Lab half the time. I'd say we spend half the time ahead of City Lab. On weeks like last week, we tend to fall back a little bit. They've fallen back a little bit too, not quite as far as we have. They have this huge base. But it's one of these things that, we look at. Is our message resonating with people? Are people engaging with it? Are they getting through? We're not writing, clickbaity stuff. We're writing like meaty, substantive, meaningful content. Are people actually engaging with it? Yes, they are, at really, really high levels. When we expose people to our message, they find it compelling, they find it engaging, and they stick around. So these are the first two things: create powerful content, share a message. The third one is the one I think where we've struggled the most, nudging people to take action. When we look at taking action, what we're really talking about is three things. We want people to share a message with others. That's how we grow this movement. When other people are telling people in their words about our message. The second is by becoming a member. When people say, okay, this is compelling enough to me, it matters, I want other people to see this, I'm going to give you $5 a month, $10 a month, $25 a year, whatever it is, to become a member. It's a way for us to not only fund our movement and help us do this more, but it's also like a level of commitment that allows us to make this really strong bond with people. And then the third one is take action in your place. Actually go out and do something, whatever your capacity is, to go out and do something to make your place a little bit better. We become really, really good at, we've seen a huge uptick in people out there sharing our message. Social shares have always been huge. We're now off the charts with that. It's actually gotten to the point where I can't track it all anymore. People talking about and sharing our message. We started this thing this year where we said, if you want to have a local conversation, because we kept getting people who would contact us all the time saying, I want to get together with people in my hometown and talk strong towns. can you make that happen for us? And like, we don't have the bandwidth to do that. So what we said is we do have the bandwidth to start this page. And if you want people to get together and talk about strong towns, go to this site and see if there's people doing it. And if there's not, go ahead and start your own group, and we can mail out people in your area and let them know. But this is going to have to happen kind of not with us leading it in a sense, but with us maybe like organizing it. We're now over 70 of these like local meetup groups, and there's new ones forming every month. And they contact us and say, hey, we're Strong Towns Baton Rouge. We want to become financially strong and resilient. Come have our conversation. And some of them are duds. Like some of them are not working out well. It's one or two people and they don't have a lot of traction, but some of them are really taking off and are really starting to do amazing, amazing things. Membership. I think everybody on this call understands our membership program. Like I said, membership is kind of like a two-way relationship. Not only are people giving us a donation regularly to help us be here and grow this movement and do the things that we do, but we're trying our best to support our members, to be there for them, to help them out, to respond to their needs. When we do the monthly Ask Me Anything, we prioritize member questions. We do our best to try to support our members because they are not only committed to us, but generally like committed to a place as well. Our membership has grown a lot. We're up to, I think, 2,440 members. We're approaching 2,500. That's where we're at right now. Our goal for this year is 3,000. I'm feeling pretty confident that we're going to make that goal. Right now, I feel like we're going to blow past that goal based on the number of prospects we have in our pipeline. We're going to have a member drive again in November, and feeling pretty good about where we're at right now. Success stories, the idea of helping nudge people to take action by pointing out things that other people have done. We've made a real active effort over the last, I think really intense over the last 2 years, to document instances where people say they've done something and they were inspired by Strong Towns. It's a fine line to walk because as an organization, we don't want to take credit for work that other people have done. And we want to make sure that we, give everybody, because we have people out there doing amazing things, and we want to just like honor that and celebrate that and say, what a great thing. But we also, as a movement, want to take a little bit of credit for this too. Like, look, these people were out doing this inspired by the Strong Towns message. They said, Strong Towns helped them do this, or Strong Towns motivated them to do this. And so we've been documenting those. If you go to strongtowns.org/success, you get this long list of success stories. People out there doing stuff in the name of Strong Towns. This is what the page looks like. We get pretty decent amount of traffic on here. It's fun to be able to point foundations and others towards this page because a lot of people, when they come to Strong Towns and they're like, what do you mean you just do content? What do you mean you're just sharing this message? Why don't you do consulting? Why don't you come to my town and help me write a new code? Why don't you come to my town and help us with this road and street project? And when we say no, when we say like, that's not what we do, that's not our core thing, that's not what we're best at, there's a little bit of like deflation, like, oh, well, what, how much impact are you having? And so we point to the people on this page, they come away really impressed, like, wow, this message does matter. Your approach is making a difference. So let me just real quickly, and then I think we're doing okay on time. We'll get to Bo for some final thoughts and some questions. I wanted to give you in this very first briefing that we're doing, we're not going to go over like all that stuff we just went over every time. What I would like to do is once a quarter, sit down and do these briefings. As Bo said, like a company does an earnings call and say, here's where we're at, here's what happened, here's what we're working on, and then go from there. So like a more quicker briefing with a longer like Q&A back and forth session. But I want to give you a little bit here of the kind of things I'd like to do in the future, which is to tell you about what we're working on, what we're doing, and how we think this thing's going to work. So one of the things that we're working on right now is something we're calling the knowledge base. We have not announced this yet, although the site is live. If you go to help.strongtowns.org, you will see it. I'm going to click over to that right now. What we have found is that not only are we just overwhelmed with questions and inquiries, we have a lot of people that would like to do things, and we have all this content about how to go out and do stuff. What we really needed was a way to organize it better. And we've tried organizing some of it on the site, but really what we found is that we needed something more like a help page. If you look at a knowledge base that other organizations will have that sell software or, have FAQs on how to do things, what we want to do is create a similar kind of database for us so that people who have questions can go there and get an answer instead of like waiting for us to try to get back to them. And also so we can take some of our best content and put it in here to walk people through how to do things. This is up and running now. We've not announced it. We've not put it out there. We're trying to get the parking module done first and pilot it with a handful of people so we get like a sense of how this is going to work before we turn like the world loose on this. But if you see, like right now, we're working on parking. We're creating a guide to handling parking issues in your community. Here's an introduction, understanding how much parking costs, determining the right amount of parking, finding productive uses for excess parking, working with others to solve parking problems, and then resources. What we want people to do is get inspired by our content. And then when they want to take action and say, what can I do? We want to be able to walk them through a path where they learn to think like Strong Towns advocates. They learn to understand issues from a Strong Towns perspective. And they actually have like concrete things that they can go out and do. This is related to our content, and we're using content to do this. But what we found is that, if we write a really compelling piece about parking, it doesn't necessarily format well to, okay, I'm in, like, you don't have to convince me anymore. This is great. Like, I want to go out and do stuff. What do I do? And so that's what this page is all about. We hope to have this launched. I said, my hope is that by the end of this month, by the end of October, we can have stuff up and running and have it out to a wider public. I think we'll be on that path. For sure, though, by the end of the year. I mean, we want to enter next year. We've got a plan for like 5 different modules we want to put together next year. The idea is to get this parking one in, see how it works, test it, kind of beta test this approach, and then launch it on a wider scale. Jacob, if you listen to It's the Little Things podcast, Jacob hosts that one. Jacob is the guy, Jacob Moses on our staff, who's working on the help page. Brilliant guy, great technical writer, really fun guy, and is doing just a knock-up job. I realize now that I didn't talk about Google earlier, and I'm going to do that here now, because one of the things we're doing along with this knowledge base is reformatting our content campaigns. I won't give you the whole history of our content campaigns, but it is a broad overview. What we have tried to do, or what we try to do, is aggregate our content together so that people who are interested, for example, in parking, can find other related posts to parking. To the point where, we try to get really good landing pages in place where people are coming to our site and then can get like an introductory article about a topic, understand how we think about it and interpret it at Strong Towns, and then get a list of like, here's what I can do in my community, and then here's some case studies and some other people who have done similar things. What we're trying to do is, in a more sophisticated way, connect all those things together. So the knowledge base and learning path that you just saw that Jacob's working on, with the content side that Daniel is aggregating, with our advertising and other campaigns. We've called this an offer campaign because the idea is to kind of cluster it all together and then to use that as the thing we use to go out and reach new audiences. This is also going to be really great for our current audience. It's going to be formatted in a way that will be useful for them. But we particularly like the possibility of using this to reach new people. This is where I'm going to talk about Google Ads. Google gives us $10,000 a month of free AdWords. There's some restrictions with that, but basically, if you go out and do a search, we can, in our space, be rather competitive in those searches. We have spent the last year and a half trying to understand what people are searching for that would get them to our site, what they're interested in. And what we learned is that we can generate a lot of traffic really easily. But people, when they're searching, are kind of finicky. And so a lot of these searches have really high bounce rates. People who will come, they'll be on our site for 3 seconds, 5 seconds. This is not what I'm looking for. And then bam, they're gone. And so what we try to do is say, how do we capture a higher percentage of that traffic that's coming in and keep them and have them stay on our site? These offer campaigns are our response to doing that. Let's take our content, let's format it, let's have really good search strings. So when people go out and search for parking minimums, they wind up on like the page for parking minimums, where, or if they wind up on a content piece, that the content piece leads them back to like the page where they're going to get everything that they want. And the page is going to be, again, go back to Crazy Egg. It's going to be formatted well. They're going to be able to find what they want easily. They're going to get there and they're going to stay. That's what we're trying to do. That's what we're trying to do. And these offer campaigns are a way for us to kind of organize that. The third thing that we're working on that's new that I wanted to put out there is the regional gatherings. When we are done here, I'm going to take the studio, the podcast, all the gear apart and pack it up. And then I'm headed to Plano, Texas. I'm giving a curbside chat tomorrow night. And then Thursday and Friday, we are doing what we're calling a regional gathering. We've got people from all over the country. We've got people coming from Detroit and other places, but largely from Texas, coming to spend a day and a half with us. The first day is sharing information. The second day is working with people individually to develop work plans for how they can go out and make a difference in their place. What we found is that we can go out and do events, and events are a really, really powerful way for us to get our message in front of people. But we've now built up enough of a movement around the country where we actually feel compelled to help motivate people to the next step by meeting them in person, having a more intimate conversation, sharing like a 202 level conversation, not just a 101 level conversation, and then using that as a way for us to collaboratively work through and say, how do we go out and actually make change in a community? What can Strong Towns do to help? How can you make this happen? Here's like our kind of shared knowledge on how to do this. We're doing North Texas tomorrow, starting tomorrow. We've got some other ones on the calendar, kind of tentatively. You see some names here: Southern California, Akron, upstate New York. I would say these are in the very, very tentative category. We've not committed to any of these, and we certainly don't have a ground game in any of these. We kind of wanted to get through this first one and see where we're at and see what we learned, and then retool and say, okay, what do we do better? How do we do this better? And what are the best places for doing this? But look for us to do, 2 or 3 of these, I think, next year. And then, depending on their success, continue to do this on a more ongoing basis. And then finally, the fourth big thing that we did is we started this Friends of Strong Towns the group. We have a number of people who have contributed to us, who have donated us, who have been a part of our conversation from early days that are very important to us. And not only important because you're helping us out and making us successful, but also because you've got a sense of what we're trying to accomplish, what we're trying to do. And just like shareholders in a corporation, you're shareholders in our movement. And so we want to make sure that you have the insider access and understanding, and that we're having a more, like I said, intimate and direct conversation with you. In the early days of Strong Towns, when I was very small, I talked to readers all the time. I talked to, I knew every one of our early members. I don't know them all now. I don't. I show up at places and people come up and say, I'm a member. And I'll say, I thank you from the bottom of my heart, but I don't know them. I miss that. And I miss that not only because it was a good thing, but because I learned a lot from it. And so part of this conversation is that we want to have a way for you to not only get to us, but for us to have this ongoing dialogue with you about the organization, the details, the strategy, the direction we're going. Because I value your instincts, I value your insight, and really it's been people like you who have been there from the start and really made this organization what it is. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Bo, and then I think we'll do some questions.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Chuck. That was all really helpful. If anyone has questions, I think you can just put them in the chat box in your lower right-hand corner. We'll be happy to take a few of those questions. We'll have probably 10 minutes to answer those. I just want last thing to quickly talk about our revenue targets, our 2018 revenue targets on the Friends page. Let's see if I can share my screen. Yeah, on the Friends page, you can see some of the revenue targets. We actually need to update this by 1 month. But with this, you can see for event revenue, we've exceeded our goals. We're doing a ton of events. As Chuck mentioned, we have a huge demand for Chuck to speak across the country. We'll do over 50 events this year. We now have a few other speakers who are helping us out. And as Chuck mentioned, this is a huge opportunity for us. We see incredible impact when we do these events in places, bringing people together. So it's a great way to share a message, get our message out there, but also fund this larger movement. Foundation support, I think we're actually at 130,000. So we've met and exceeded that foundation goal. Most of that was from a large grant we received from the Knight Foundation to do some work in Akron. So we're incredibly grateful for that. So we've met that. If you jump down to the bottom, if you see membership revenue, so we are basically 3/4 of the way through the year and basically, on track to meet that revenue goal for membership. And as Chuck said, hopefully by the end of this year, we'll be at 3,000 members and we'll meet or exceed that goal. If you jump back up to that third line item, the individual donation goal. So that's, as Chuck was talking about, connected to this Friends of Strong Towns club. These are gifts from members that exceed the kind of usual membership goal of $25 or $50 that we're going for. So these are people who are kind of shareholders in our movement, who believe in what we're doing and want us to share this message with more people. So this is obviously something that we're looking to grow more of. We have incredible demand for the Strong Towns message. So that is what we need. Meeting that goal is what we need to meet the demand that we see for our message. So that's something we'll be updating you on in the coming weeks and coming months. So I will get out of sharing my screen.
Thanks, Bo. If I could just add one thing to that too, I think for us, Bo, you've been on full time since January, and you actually started with us in June or July of 2017. So you've been here over a year now. I think one of the things that you coming here has illuminated for me, and has been a source of some frustration, I think, for us, is that when we go and talk to foundations, they love our message. They love what we're doing. They think it's fantastic. They always want us to do things, though, that are not don't fit our strategy and our mission. They want us to essentially change who we are and do local consulting, spend time on the ground, writing plans and ordinances and writing reports. And, we've been able to do a little bit of things. We've been able to do some engagements with some foundations and some things that are consistent with like what we're set up to do. But talk a little bit about, I think the idea, the resources that we have tended to get from people who have donated to us, who have been passionate about what we're doing and how we're doing, and how that is different than what we've seen with foundations and others who have not really, I think, melded as well with our strategy.
Yeah. Well, since I came on about a year ago, have talked to a number of foundations, both large and small, and have had, people love the Strong Towns message, as Chuck was saying, but there's this kind of disconnect between, and a lot of it goes back to what Chuck was just sharing. We are a media organization, and that doesn't always fit into kind of, if you're a foundation, you want to fund kind of sexy programs. There's a lot about Strong Towns and the way that we're operating that doesn't fit into those sexy categories, but we see that we're having a tremendous impact. I've traveled with Chuck a number of times. We go places, Chuck shares the message. There's people there who just come up and say, you've transformed the way I think about my city. You've transformed the way that Chuck was in Pensacola last year and kind of completely transformed the way that they're thinking about spending money that they were getting from the BP oil spill. So there's impact that we're seeing from our media strategy that doesn't always translate into programs that foundations are interested in funding. So there's been kind of frustration with that. We've had to kind of adapt and figure out the best way to share our message and best way to fit, what we're doing into their programs. One of the things I told Chuck when I first came on, and this is kind of not exactly totally true, but a lot of foundations are either in one or two categories. They're either trying to solve an issue. So like the Gates Foundation is trying to solve homelessness in America. So that's an issue. The Gates Foundation actually cares very little about places. They're trying to solve an issue. Then there's foundations that are focused on a geography, a place, however they define that, whether it's city, county, region, whatever. Our message is especially appealing to that latter category, those foundations that are focused on a place, because they care about their city. They care about Detroit. They care about upstate New York. They care about Akron. But we are a national media organization trying to change the national dialogue about growth and development. And so there's kind of, not a disconnect, but it takes some convincing and it takes some talking to kind of meld those two together. So that's been, a little bit of a I don't really call it a struggle, but just a lot of conversations to figure out where we fit in with our strategy, because we're convinced that the strategy we have is having a huge impact.
I'm going to go through, I see in the comments that Alex said that they're getting their Strong Towns group together and that Maca is part of that. So that's pretty cool.
Maca's fantastic. So we're working with her to do some of the stuff. Actually, a lot of the stuff with this Friends of Strong Towns club that you're seeing, Maca has helped me with. So it's great. I see another question from Hale McCollum, from someone we know as well. So she says, can people give larger individual donations on the site? Largest amount I see is $1,000. That's actually something we're working on right now and should have a new kind of membership donate page in hopefully before we do the member drive, and hopefully later this month. So there will be a place to do that on that site.
We've been updating that. It's interesting because there's a lot of there's a lot of programming interface stuff that has to go into making that work. I also have had this kind of reluctance because every time we go through there, we lose a little bit. There's a haircut that happens from the processing company. And so I tell people, if you want to give a donation that is, significant, let's chat, because there's going to be ways to do that where we won't be paying credit card processing companies that would probably, help things go further for you and for us as well.
So Raleigh Cole has a few questions. Chuck, I think this first one's probably best for you. So Raleigh basically says, it strikes me that not all members' fans are equal, reaching policymakers, state and federal, city, state, and federal, and their consultants, advisors, staff strikes me as a particular value as opposed to retirees like me. So basically he's asking how are we targeting folks? How are we making sure that we're reaching the right people who are going to have an impact? This is a question I've thought a lot about, and I think you have a really good answer for it. And I'll just up front before you answer say, there is no limit to the kind of influential connections that we have. And since I came on, I've been kind of one of the managers of that. I mean, earlier this week, Chuck and I were connected to someone high up at Uber. And that's the week before we were connected to a congressman who's been following us. And, it impacted him wanting to get on the transportation committee. So there's no limit to these really strong, influential connections, but it's just what to do with some of those connections. So Chuck, I'll let you answer that.
Yeah. The governor of North Dakota is a Strong Towns member. We've got mayors all over the country that are Strong Towns member, Congress people. It blows me away. Really. This, not only the person, the executive at Uber, but I mean, this week I had the interview with the CEO of Neighborly, which is a huge, Silicon Valley, big bond processing company. You're going to see that interview out next week. I think if we wanted to be, let me put it this way. I think early on in Strong Towns, I thought if we can just reach like the professionals, this will work really well. And I realized that like you could show professionals whatever, and it's not going to matter. And it's not going to matter because, and my first thought was the elected officials don't get this stuff. So let's get like, really smart people who are influential and in important positions. Let's let them know this. And that had a little bit of effect, but like everybody wanted, I mean, I can't tell you how many days I spent writing legislation. Like that's not what I want to do. It's not what I'm good at doing. And I remember I wrote this here in Minnesota. They had this bill. They were trying to redo the transportation bill, and there was a group there that just loves Strong Towns and come down and help us with this. And I remember sitting up late, like 2 a.m. I'm rewriting this legislation, and then of course nothing happened. It didn't even go to committee or anything. And I just, after doing that a number of times, I realized like this is not what we're good at. And this is not where we're going to have a huge impact. We can inspire those people, and I'm certainly happy to talk to them and certainly happy to help like nudge them along. But we're trying to change the development pattern for a continent. And we don't have our budget this year is huge compared to what it was 3 years ago, but our budget is tiny. I mean, $500,000 is like nothing compared to like the scope of the problem, changing the entire development pattern of a continent. What I realized is that we need to change the cultural conversation. And if we change the cultural conversation, if we can get like that group of trendsetters who are some elected officials and some appointed officials and some smart people at major corporations and all that, and we do target them and we do talk to them, and when they pop up, we share our time with them, but we don't get like sucked down a rabbit hole. Because what we've got to do is we've got to actually shift like the median understanding of this country in a certain direction and give room for all those people who are trying to make change happen and do things. We got to give them room to work. So for me, the idea of getting, 3,000 people who are giving us $5 and $10 a month, it's powerful, not just because of the revenue stream. It's powerful because of what it represents. It represents a change in our cultural flow, the flow and the conversation of the country. So yes, we'll target those people. We'll talk to them, but we can't, I keep harping on like all of us, we can never be distracted by the shiny object. We've got to stay focused on what we do best and what we see having like a huge impact. Fair, Bo?
Yep. That sounds great. I guess we'll just take this one last question real quick, but Raleigh says, what about sponsorship? And seems like he's talking about basically firms that are within our movement or planning, development, architecture firms that might want to sponsor us and be part of the website, maybe have ads on our site. So we do have on our website, the Strong Towns website, we have a space for sponsors. We have a number of sponsors. This is something that's kind of been on our radar to do and to build out. Honestly, it's a matter of time. This is something, I've spent a little bit of time getting a few firms to sponsor us. Usually that comes with strings that might detract from kind of momentum elsewhere. So it's it's something we definitely want to grow, and it's something I'm going to look to grow with this Friends of Strong Towns Club. But it's also something that can kind of be frustrating to work with, in the same way that, you know, working with foundations can be sometimes frustrating.
Let me give an example. Because if you go on our site, you'll see, like, unlike CityLab or Grist or like really like any other page, we don't run ads. We don't run ads at all. And, you know, I've seen, like, in our, like just this week in Akron, some of the stuff we've run in our Akron content, someone in Akron wrote a review of Strong Towns, and they're like, yep, it's all clickbait to drive up their ad revenue. And, you know, they're obviously, like, clearly the guy doesn't know what he's talking about, because we don't run ads. And so clickbait doesn't really work for us. You know, like, clicks don't really help us unless people stick around and engage in the content. But there's, you know, I think we battled that, like, perception that we're just about selling ads. Let me give you a prime example, though, of like a sponsorship one that I think poses some ethical questions for us, and some, you know, when you're building a movement, we kind of owe it to our members and others to take this really seriously. So I want to give you a donation. I would also like to be a guest on your podcast. I will give you a donation, and I also want to, you know, run a piece of content, guest content that we write. Okay, separate those two things out. I want to give you a donation, support you, because I really like what you're doing. I think it's really important. And our answer to that is fantastic. We would love that. We'd really appreciate that. We want all the partners and help that we can get. The second one becomes like a different question then. Like, is what you're talking about interesting to our audience? Does it meet our, like, content objectives? Does it fit within a campaign? Is it part, like, strategically of what we're trying to do? Is it something that will discredit us in the long run? Is it something that will, like, water down our feed so that people will say, well, I'm not sure I want to listen to that because, you know, clearly, like, it's not very compelling. And so sometimes we've done those where we've said, okay, like, this particular issue or thing or person, this is really compelling on its own, and we would do this anyway, irrespective. I think there's a fine line there, though, and it's put us in some uncomfortable positions where we've had to, you know, we've quite frankly turned down some money that we could have used because it didn't really make sense for us and for the movement. I think that's kind of tough. We don't want to run ads, right, Bo?
No, I don't think so.
No. And I know, like, culturally people have gotten used to it. I think the little bit that we give up today by not doing it, I think is going to help us from a credibility standpoint as we continue to grow and grow and add thousands of new people every month. I think I think it's going to help. I think it's a discipline that will pay off for us.
Well, great. I think that's all the questions. So we will let everyone go. Last about an hour and a half, or hour and 15 minutes. So that's a perfect time. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to join us. And this webcast will be made available for everyone afterwards, so you can come back and watch it.
Thank you. And feel free to get a hold of us. I put my cell phone and Bo's cell phone and our, like, insider email address, my one that doesn't get spam, so just for friends, put those on the website, so you can email me directly, and I'll do my best to get back to you. And you can call me or text me if you want, and we'll chat. Otherwise, plan on hearing from us in the coming months, and we'll do another one of these after the first of the year. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.